Soft skills can be learnt from books, during conversations, and in teams. We all need them, so how can you develop them? Let's explore. When was the last time you learned something? I would hazard a guess that it was probably yesterday, the day before, sometime this week. There's one new thing that you've learned. Maybe you've engaged in a process called Heutagogy. I discovered this week with Dr. Timothy Stafford through his TED Talk on self-determined learning. And it got me intrigued. What is this concept of Heutagogy? And I've been deep diving this week, and I want to share with you some insights that I'm already gaining that I think could be relevant to all of us, especially those who want to develop their soft skills. So let's have a look. Firstly, people often wonder or may ask, what's the difference between pedagogy, andragogy, heutagogy? You see here on screen, I've got all three. Pedagogy is what happens when we're going through primary school and high school, where the teacher focus, the curriculum, the structure that everyone kind of goes through the same thing happens. And that's why a lot of people don't like school, because school is a process where we have to do what others want us to do. When we engage at university, for instance, or other forms of higher learning, perhaps you have moments of doing some short courses, or like when I did my coach training, we're engaging in andragogy. This is where the adult learner, especially those with experience, that experience matters. That's taken into consideration. And so the focus is still sort of 50-50, half between the teacher and the content, but at the same time including the thoughts and wishes, or the experience, the discussion points with the adult learner. And so that's what I definitely engage in when I'm at my university. And I love the idea of co-creating with my students throughout all of my classes. I don't come necessarily as an expert. I have more knowledge, I have more ideas, but I also curate that knowledge and facilitate people through a process of learning where they can really take away perhaps what I'm trying to depart. But this is still focused in a way on the teacher, on the educational institution, or the framework and structure that comes with that. So what about heutagogy then? So heutagogy, according to Timothy Stafford, and I've got his book here on the left, is where the learner absolutely self-determines what they would like to learn. He says in his TED Talk, when have you approached YouTube just for fun to learn something? Maybe you're someone who in your spare time loves to cook, and so you start to look at recipes, you look at techniques, you look at things that can help perhaps you to influence your own abilities to be a better cook. It's not that you want to shift in and be a professional cook at some point, but you get a sense of satisfaction that comes from absolutely being your own learning guide. And this is what heutagogy is all about. You are the determinant of what you need to learn, how you're going to learn that, how you're going to assess your own learning, and how do you make sure that you're surrounding yourself with a community of practice, say, that could be very helpful for you. So the difference here is that the teacher role is not so full on, whereas the person may be a mentor, a guide, or a support. When I was reading through the chapter article that I referenced in my LinkedIn article, there was a step-by-step process that very much reminded me of coaching. As an ICF PCC coach myself, I recognized that there were elements of allowing the person to come to the space and to design what it is they need. Then throughout that learning journey, the person is going to the direction that they want to gain the types of resources that they need and want, to get the knowledge, to get the experience through the learning process that they'd like to, which is very much about again, with coaching, what is your goal? What is your reality? What are your options? And it's the coach that guides with questions. So I can see a lot of overlap here, perhaps with a heutagogical approach in an educational facility. And I'm going to be much more focused, perhaps in the next 6 to 12 months, and seeing how much of a reality I can make this in some of my international business communication classes. So the idea perhaps is not new, especially if you think of the concept of lifelong learning. Perhaps you are a lifelong learner, and that's wonderful. And so a few more quotes that I want to share with you here that dive into this a bit deeper from Thomas Stafford in his book. The first one there, it transforms learners from passive recipients into architects of their own learning. Wouldn't you like to be an architect of your own learning? Are you an architect of your own life? And this is what Heutagogy will give you. My words here, that this is, it's really like that the teachers are guides and coaches, which is great. And what he says throughout the book so far, that I'm sort of deep halfway through it right now, but I'm so excited that I want to share this with you, is that he talks about the fact that it taps into intrinsic motivation. And if you watched what I did last week, I talked about those differences between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, especially when it comes to developing our soft skills. And so you need to be actively engaged with your learning. And this is lifelong learning. But he also introduced another concept that I want to share, which is life-wide learning. And I'll explain that in a minute. I like this quote where he says, "This shift is crucial in a world where the only constant is change, and the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn is indispensable. Heutagogy gives students the tools they need to pursue knowledge for its own sake, out of innate curiosity and a desire to comprehend the world more fully." So we live in constant change. We've talked about that before. And so we need soft skills to help us navigate the changing landscape of our professional environment. We also need to think, therefore, about how in which we can learn, unlearn, and relearn things. So this is where Heutagogy as an approach is absolutely appropriate. And I think in and of its own, it's maybe a very useful idea to remember to frame your own learning journey. So from my article, what do you want to learn? Write down some goals, some outcomes. And it doesn't mean that you've mastered that area, but maybe you've made small steps along the way. Design how you're going to get that learning. Will you engage in online resources? Will you talk to people? Will you attend a course? Will you go to university? What will be the learning journey that you need to take, and how long do you need to take that? This is why micro-credentials now are so important in higher education, because they give people a short chance to dive in, dip into what they need, get the tools that they want, and go and utilize them in their own space. It's not about having to attend 3-4 year long programs and things. And so this is developing our own sense of curiosity as well, a desire to comprehend the world more fully. This, to me, is really the essence of what we need when we're reflecting on our journey. And that's the last part of a heutagogical practice that we might develop. So we've worked out our outcomes, we've worked out the journey, we take the journey, and then we reflect on that journey. And this relates in many ways to the famous team stages of development by Bruce Tucker. This relates to other models, for instance, of emotional intelligence, or the way in which we can perceive and use our own thoughts and feelings. So there's a lot of connection here with already concepts that you might know. So before I finish with a summary slide, I want to read a section here from the book about life-wide learning. Life-wide learning is the sort of learning that we do at all times, in all facets of our life. So it's lifelong, but life-wide as well. He says in the book, lifelong and life-wide learning, integral to Heutagogy, expands the scope of education beyond traditional boundaries, recognizing that learning occurs continuously across all facets of life. Heutagogy encourages individuals to cultivate a mindset of perpetual curiosity and growth. This perspective ensures that learners remain engaged and adaptable, prepared to meet the evolving demands of their personal and professional lives. For me, this is a wonderful summary, and a lot of soft skills are being mentioned there: adaptability, curiosity, growth mindset, intrinsic motivation I talked about before. So these are factors that we can absolutely develop through this practice. So one last slide to bring us home now. I want to encourage you to think about your own topics. Where do you need to expand your life-wide learning? How are you engaged in your own learning? We need to root this in this structure. So read my article from LinkedIn just yesterday that goes into that structure. Seek a community of practice, collaboration, social networks, social media. All of these resources are also important. We don't make our learning journeys alone. We need to seek a community. It's about a mindset. So we can develop that mindset when we consider that learning is not just for our our educational purposes, for our training when we're on board in a company or when we're going through school, that learning occurs at all times, and we can use our own life experiences to fuel that as well. And lastly, for me, this brings it back to emotional intelligence. Our emotions are crucial in what we're doing here. And so when we can tap into those emotional resources, if you need a clue, I often say to people in my workshops and seminars and lectures, what are your favorite words? So those could be a clue to the areas that you want to dive in a little bit more, where your passion will light up. And you'll find, as I am in this moment with Heutagogy, finding concepts that you haven't heard of that fill perhaps some knowledge gaps, like a jigsaw puzzle. So we start to see a clearer picture about what we're trying to do, and we're not just sort of winging it as we go along. So please read up a little bit more about Heutagogy. If you've gotten this far in the video and you want to connect with me, I'd love to have a virtual coffee with you and understand how I can help you to learn and grow and to develop that Heutagogical mindset in your own life as well. So please, let's stay in touch, and I look forward to hearing more about your learning journeys and where you're going to next.